7 sleeps till Christmas. It's time to check your parents' cupboards for a Christmassy This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Are you my type?
Jagged Emulation.
And a brand new Amiga 2000.
All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, chaps. Dave, I have to say I've noticed a pattern with our story taglines at the start of each show. Your pun game is poor. Brand new Amiga 2000. Come on, we need the puns, Dave.
I know. I need a good. I couldn't think of one. I like a good pun. You know, I like a good pun. Yeah. I couldn't think of one. I will have to try harder in 2023. Is that my New Year's resolution?
There you go. Yeah, we do need New Year's resolutions, don't we? Because when this goes out, it will be just 7 days until Christmas. So it's a Christmassy one. And I was talking to Chris before we started recording the show. So for those who are only listening on audio, Chris is wearing a Christmassy top, but it's not a Christmas jumper. So how do you do it in Australia? Because obviously it's your summertime, isn't it?
It is hot, yeah. So generally you get Christmas T-shirts, not Christmas jumpers. And slight confession, I went around the shops looking specifically for a Christmas T-shirt just to have on the show. And there was heaps to choose from the ladies section. But Dave, before you start, no, it's not a ladies' jumper or T-shirt, right? And there was next to nothing in the gents. So this is actually a pajama top. It's the only one I could find I liked. So there you go. Honestly. I'm presenting in my pajamas.
You don't know how much this upsets me. In the show notes, I've got a line which just says, "My boiler, give me sympathy," because my boiler has been broken for the best part of a week. So I've got no heating, no hot water. The boiler man's in this afternoon to hopefully fix it. And you're sat there going, "Oh, it's too hot for a Christmas jumper. I'm wearing a pajama top."
Neil, I'm It's Dave in shorts.
I'm wearing shorts. Shorts. I'm wearing shorts.
It's too hot, and hopefully the hum's not coming through, but the air conditioning is on. Yes.
Oh, go away.
We might have to go down the beach Christmas Day because it does get a little bit too sticky and hot, and we'll have a barbecue with some prawns and stuff. And, yeah, it's a hard
I do
life.
feel Christmassy though, because
Chuck
if I look out the window,
the Barbie.
If I look out the window, it is snowing. Or no, it's not snowing. It has snowed, and the snow is all settled. So I've got fields of snow out the window. We've just had Christmas in the cave this weekend with the non-alcoholic mulled wine on the go because people have to drive to get to the cave, and the mince pies and the brandy cream and the Christmas music. So I'm feeling pretty Christmassy, even if I don't look it because I'm not wearing a Christmas jumper. I've got my heated hoodie on. Anyway, let's get on to some actual retro stuff. I just thought I'd bring up some of our regular things. So auctions are quite a regular thing that come up on the show. So without going into the full story, on Auction Watch this week, submitted by Dr. Local, an Apple One has gone up for auction. This one is hand-numbered by Steve Jobs. Now, I don't know how unusual that is. I imagine the first batch or batches would have been hand-numbered. And that auction is currently active and sitting at $241,000. Huge amount of money. I can see why, because, this is like the very first super popular home computer, really, isn't it? Alongside the TRS-80 and the PET. Well, I guess it was the Apple II, so this comes slightly before that, doesn't it? Slightly before
was the Apple One super popular? It was popular.
No, the Apple II was. But the Apple One, I guess, was its origins, its roots, showed it was possible,
sense,
On Can It Run Doom Watch, a story's been submitted of a Christmas tree ornament hanging on the tree running Doom. So, yes, a Christmas tree ornament can run Doom. We've learned today. And on last week's show, there was a comment left on the YouTube comments from a regular listener, the Rushton. Hello there. And they put in a request. They said, can we have Chris's alpha update each week? So, Chris, is it still working?
I drove it today. It's working as of today, but I do have to turn the air conditioning on to force the radiator fan to work. Other than that, it's fine.
There we go. Alpha update. Chris, how's your week been?
Well, funnily enough, from alphas to Jags, because I've been playing my Jag. I mean, I actually got it ages ago, but it was put away for birthday/Christmas, so I got it. My wife let me unpack it for my birthday, which was late November. So that's what I've been getting my hands dirty with. Also my CD32, actually, because I finally got a controller for that. So 2 consoles from around the same area I've been getting back into, should I say.
Did you get an original CD32 controller or a third party? Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually ordered both, and the third party's still on its way, but it's the original one I've been playing with, and I actually quite like it. I don't know what all the hate's about. It's not bad at all. But I've heard, depending on what guts it's got in it, some are better than others apparently. But this one's fine.
I think generally the criticism is aimed at the shape of it as much as anything. I don't find it particularly uncomfortable to hold on to, but then I don't usually play it for extended periods, so maybe it gets a bit achy after a while. I don't know.
Might depend on the type of game. I haven't tried to beat them up or anything like that yet. I've just been trying Super Stardust, what I would call an Asteroids clone, but there's actually more depth to it than that, and that's quite enjoyable on it. But yeah, just a note for those listening, do make sure you listen all the way to the end, as we know you always do. But this week's question of the week is a little bit special, and I'll be explaining why some of us have things wrapped up in Christmas paper this year. So that's worth hanging out for.
I'll just hold up my stocking. I'll edit in the package a bit later, or Duncan will. Sorry, I haven't got it here, but nice. it'll all be seamless by the end of the show. Dave, how's your week been?
Well, my boiler broke, so what I did was I fixed it and then turned it back on again, and now I'm nice and warm again.
Oh, really? Great story, Dave.
It's great to be warm, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. I remember about 2 years ago, I had no end of plumbing problems in this house, no end of them, and Neil mercilessly mocked me. Now, how do you feel about that now, Neil?
Read what you say. I know. And all the problems I'm having, I should have foreseen them, really, because when we bought the house here, it was previously owned by a landlord who really didn't care about the house and paid as little as possible on the upkeep and the maintenance of it. And there's so much has been bodged. Like the moment the electrics were looked at, they were basically condemned and the whole thing was replaced. The moment the boiler's gone wrong and has been looked at, the boiler man's just like, why would they have done it that way? What's going on? So, everything that gets looked at has to just be ripped out and started again. So I should have known all of this before I was ribbing you all those years ago, Dave. It always comes back to get you, doesn't it?
Well, I am still sympathetic towards Lily. She doesn't deserve that.
She doesn't.
On to housekeeping. I am disappointed that I do not have a jingle yet. I want a jingle for housekeeping.
Yeah, if someone else doesn't do it, I'm going to have to make you a jingle.
Yeah, I am delighted with the responses to the latest episode where I talked about the Amiga. I was quite worried I might upset people. I realised the Amiga is quite an important thing emotionally to people, but I'm really pleased with the informative responses from it, and I'm really pleased how people have been open about it and quite honest and informative. People talking about the state of the Commodore and in terms of banking and so on. So I'm really pleased with that. Have a look at last week's comments if you want to be informed. And we are sponsored by Pixel Addict magazine, which I don't seem to
can't find. Dave, just going back to the comments, are you saying you're pleased about the comments because most of them were saying Dave's right? There were
not so much because there was because there was so much. Oh, Chris has got it. Not so much because they were saying Dave's right, although some were, because there wasn't any angry or upset people in the comments.
It was constructive.
I don't want to make anyone unhappy. Pixel Addict, I am less prepared today because I am horribly hungover. It was the Christmas Zoom night from my works last night, so I am a wreckage of a man. I can't wait to get this finished to go back to my bed. But we are sponsored by Pixel Addict magazine, who are a monthly printed magazine, but you can also get it in PDF form. You can get it worldwide. It's a great read. Chris, have you had a look at it?
Well, do you know what? Funny enough, even though it's in my hand here, no, not properly, not yet. But every time you say worldwide and it's available in Australia, I'm going to be honest, I always bite my tongue because I'm thinking, but it won't come to Perth because we are the most remote city on the planet. And this I picked up in a newsagent in Australia, and that was such a fantastic thing to see. Yes, it had come all the way to Perth, and it was on the shelf, and I picked up a copy. So Now the wife wants to take it away and make it a stocking present. That's why I haven't read it yet. But anyway, yeah.
Well, if anyone is listening and not watching, he's holding a copy of Pixelatic magazine, which has made it all the way down to the bottom of the world without falling off.
What's the cover story? Because there's some nice artwork on there. What's that?
The gaming difficulty curve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just
that's the same one you've got, isn't it, Dave? I think, looking at yours.
Yeah, I've got this one, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just some nice Tron-like artwork on the front there. So anyway, yes, we thank Pixel Addict for sponsoring the show. If you want to find out more, you can go to pixel.addict.media, where you can buy a digital copy, you can order online, or check out your local newsagents. Our first story shared on our subreddit this week comes from TClawDM. So thank you for coming onto Reddit. That's reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro if you'd like to submit stories for our consideration for the show. And it's all about R-Type. It's something we don't talk about very often. Shooters, whether it be vertical or horizontal scrolling, it really doesn't come up in our conversations that much. And I'm guessing that's probably because of personal tastes in the genre and the genres that we like, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you only just mentioned Super Stardust, Chris. So where do you guys stand on shoot 'em ups?
Well, I would say it's more just the stories that are presented to us haven't been along those lines, because I absolutely love shoot 'em ups. One of my favorite genres. If all I need is a big joystick to waggle and a big fire button to bash as fast as possible, and I'm happy. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Dave?
I love shooters as well, yeah. I don't play them as much because I get frustrated at my lack of ability and coordination, but I love a good old school shooter. Not so much the modern ones with stuff busily everywhere. A good old school 1942 style shooter. Love it.
Right, so when we go into the realms of bullet hell, that's a bit too much for you? A bit too stressful,
No,
Dave?
I don't like bullet hell. I mean, it's not the same thing at all. It's you're learning patterns. You're having to memorize which place to go at.
Yeah. Well, a name that always comes up when we're talking about shoot 'em ups, or should always come up, is R-Type, and rightly so, because it's considered to be one of the best ever. It was released in 1987 by IRIM. It built on the success of games like Gradius in 1985, and before that we had Scramble in 1981. Is Scramble considered the first scrolling shooter, side-scrolling shooter?
Yeah,
there may well be earlier ones, but it is an early example. And R-Type is remembered for being a tough game. It's also remembered for the Geiger-inspired artwork. The Alien franchise was doing its thing, really heating up when this came out in '87. Yeah, I guess we'd had Aliens by that point, hadn't we? By 1987, had the second one. And then there was a big gap to the third one, wasn't there? Yeah. So, that was fresh in people's minds. And the iconic screenshot that I think many people will remember, not least because I think it's on the box art of some of the home ports, is that level 1 boss with its long wavy tail coming all the way around the screen, trying to take out your ship. It really is an iconic image. Now, R-Type was released for everything from the ZX Spectrum to the Master System to the Game Boy, but we never saw it on the Sega Genesis. I don't know. I'm just waiting for Dave's reaction to my Sega pronunciation.
What's a Genesis? Is that one of the...
Oh, so it wasn't Sega that got you, it was Genesis.
Sega, that's what it says when you load up. That's when you load up Sonic Mario Brothers, isn't it?
Or when you boot the system, isn't it? I don't know.
Wow. Okay. So it never appeared on the
Genesis.
Sega
is the Mega Drive.
Yes,
Mega Drive.
Never appeared
that's the right word
on the
for
Mega
it.
Drive. So I don't know the exact reason why the Mega Drive never got R-Type, but I'm guessing it would probably have something to do with it appearing on the PC Engine. Maybe Hudson acquired exclusive rights for it for a period when it was considered to be a current and a relevant game for the Sega Mega Drive. And then we would see it on the Super Nintendo with Super R-Type in 1991. So I'm not entirely sure why the Super Nintendo would then get it a bit later on. Maybe the license expired. I don't know. If anyone can fill us in on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But the fact is, we didn't get it on the Mega Drive until now, kind of. Andrea. No, I'm gonna absolutely massacre this name. Andrea Balderaghi. aka the RoboZ, has been working on a port for the system. He's the same person behind the Pico 8 version of the game, so he's already very familiar with it. And now he's taking on the challenge in quite an interesting way. What he plans to do is get the first 4 levels up and running, and then he'll release it as open source so that others can tweak, complete it, build upon it, and maybe even improve it, which is a really nice idea, I think. A video of a rolling demo is on YouTube, and he hopes to make a playable demo of level 1 available in the next month or so. So this is pretty imminent. And there's no reason why the Mega Drive shouldn't be able to pull this off and pull off a brilliant version. And do you know who's good at this game? Are you guys any good at R-Type? Have you played it recently?
No.
Haven't played it recently.
I'm okay-ish compared to someone who has never played it before. Not very good though. Who's good at it?
Well, someone who is good at it is coder, musician, demo scene legend Hoffman. So he was at the arcade the other day for the opening day, a couple of weeks back now it was, and we're very fortunate to have the original R-Type board here in the arcade, thanks to a chap named Alan Pope. So thank you, Alan, if you're listening, who brought that in for us. It wasn't working, but Richard was able to fix it up, and then Hoffman proceeded to absolutely crush the game on the opening night. He knows all the secrets, he knows all the techniques, he knows where to kind of put the ship, what pixels to put the ship on so that nothing can hit you for certain periods of the game. He knows all that, and he was giving us a masterclass in how to play it. So that was fantastic. Anyway, R-Type specifically, any love for this one, guys?
Yeah, and it's funny you mention new shooter games, because I was really taken with a new one that I saw on Friday evening for the Amstrad CPC called Hyperdrive. It's inspired by a game, Mission Genocide, which was a budget game that uses undocumented tricks to get 50 frames per second fast, smooth scrolling on an Amstrad CPC, which was unheard of. And the new game is a cartridge game for the CPC, and it's a vertical scroller at 25 frames per second. It's really smooth. It uses a color palette. It looks fantastic. And it is my favorite type of shooter. It's a wave-based shooter. And it's quite difficult because you need to hit everything in the waves before missing one or two in order to get the power-ups. And if you don't get the power-ups, you won't keep up. So it's quite difficult. But I prefer this type of shooter. I don't like the overly busy ones, the bullet hell ones, and the ones with all the flashing stuff and so on. I like Galaxian 1942, that type of thing. And I also like R-Type because that's the type of shooter that R-Type is. It isn't too, it's not excessive. I love the artwork in R-Type, the music. I love everything about it. It's such a perfect arcade game. The cabinet in the arcade is great. And this Mega Drive version of it is really impressive. The only thing I wasn't sure about was the remix of the music they've made. I think I might have preferred the original music, but maybe the remix will grow on me. Everything about it is spot on. I don't think you'd play this and say, I wish I was playing the arcade game instead. I think this is just right. I always find R-Type hard, though, and losing a life in R-Type is a massive punishment because you then lose all the power-ups, and you do need to work out, and just what you're talking about with Hoffman, who is... I find out a new talent that Hoffman has every day. And you do need to work out which weapon works in which way and memorize where to be. Neil.
Yeah, it has that lovely system where you hold down the fire button to build up the ray gun. Beam. I think the R stands for ray gun or something like that in the name, and then you get this big.
So it's not a Honda
that comes out of it. No, it's not a Type R. And I was just thinking on it, actually, why would Nintendo have got the rights? And actually thinking about it, Nintendo produced the arcade cabinet originally. It has Nintendo on it. So perhaps Irem were using Nintendo for the distribution and creation of the arcade cabinets. Perhaps that's a reason, and that's why they got some preferential treatment on the rights over Sega. Just a thought. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you there, Dave. Carry on.
No, I think that R-Type is the horizontal shooter. At least in my opinion, you think of a horizontal shooter, it's R-Type. This is the one. And I had a quick look at this one, and I think this might be the best home conversion of R-Type. The original ST version that I got with my ST was a pack-in when I first got the computer, and it was decent. And someone was actually working in a homebrew enhanced version for the STE. The work in progress looks fantastic, but sadly the author, Bod, passed away before finishing it. And there's also a 10-year-old homebrew for the CPC. And it's as good as you could possibly hope in the CPC. given that it's a 1985 microcomputer trying to do a 1987 arcade game. But yeah, this Mega Drive version is incredible.
Chris, any thoughts on R-Type?
Yeah, I think mainly I only played it on the Spectrum, but hearing you mention the SNES version, I reckon I would have played that as well. I don't remember playing it on the Amiga, but funny, I never played it in the arcade. I know that. But what I did play in the arcade was there was an R-Type clone on the Neo Geo cabinets called Last Resort. Have either of you played that?
I have, yes, yeah. Not on a cabinet, but just through emulation.
Yeah, I absolutely love that game. So the arcade in Tunbridge, which was next to Woolworths, that's where I'd go to skip classes from college, which was in the same town, hang out with my mates, hang out with my girlfriend. If we weren't playing Street Fighter 2, I would be on that cabinet. It was right at the back, tiny little one of those dodgy, narrow arcades that's mainly really dark, full of fruit machines, and then just a couple of choice arcade machines. And I'd just sit down on this one particular one that had, just a selection of 4 games on it. Last Resort was one of them, and I just play that over and over again. Absolutely loved it. So I got quite good at that because I was always spending limited money.
I'm just looking at the arcade flyer for Last Resort, and it says at the top, Neo Geo's 31st release. So that gives you an idea of where it came in its lifetime. And then the strapline across the front of it says, Scramble to Shooting World. Scramble to Shooting Worlds. So they've got the word scramble into the title there.
Nice.
I don't know if that was a conscious effort to get the word scramble in there or just a coincidence or a translation thing, because scramble to Shooting World is terrible English. But yeah, there you go. Just interesting that the word scramble is in there. And it's a very R-Type looking game, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
No question about it.
You've even got the weapons pod that you move around, just like R-Type. It's crazy.
But just moving away from R-Type, Chris, shoot 'em ups in general, I think you bring up the genre more than any one of us. Even though we don't have the stories always to talk about, you always slip a shoot 'em up name in there from time to time. So am I right in saying you have played a lot of them?
I have played quite a few, yeah. So just to rattle off, I do take the opportunity to mention games that Chris has played. It is true. But funnily enough, I prefer vertical scrolling shoot 'em ups for some reason. So things like Flying Shark, which I played on the Spectrum, Hybris on the Amiga, fantastic game by the same people. Battle Squadrons also on the Amiga, brilliant game, very similar to Hybris, but you can have 2-player in that. Swiv, I think everybody loves Swiv. Such a nice weight to that. In terms of the sound, the impactful hits when you actually take out the enemies and stuff, the contact and the sounds are just right. And then there's a really bizarre one that I do like to bring up called Dragon Spirit, which it's not the only game that does this, but it's a vertical scrolling shooter, but you play a dragon rather than a spaceship or a plane or anything like that. And when you get weapons power-ups, you actually get additional heads on your dragon. So if you've got like 3-way shooting, you've got 3 heads on your dragon. And then that also acts as a kind of shield because when you take a hit, you'll lose a head. So that's when your weapon system goes down and before you actually lose life. But obviously the best shoot 'em up in the world is this one, which is game 1 that I made for Rich on shoot 'em up construction kit. But yeah, no, absolutely love them. Absolutely love shoot 'em ups.
Excellent. Yeah, Dragon Spirit was 87, so same year as R-Type as well. So, nobody's accusing Dragon Spirit of copying R-Type. It's a completely different game. It's a vertical scroller. You mentioned Swiv. I tend to pick Silkworm, its predecessor, over Swiv.
It's interesting.
The side scrolling. I just like the feel of that better.
And
I'm not saying Swiv's a bad game.
I prefer the vertical. It's really weird. Yeah, it's just a preference.
And Battle Squadron, I seem to remember, has fantastic music. Am I right?
As does Hybris. They both do.
Yeah, really great. So, I don't play a huge number of shooters. I do have a soft spot for Silkworm, as I said. Gemini Wing is another one which I have a soft spot for, and I'm really pleased that we've got that in the arcade to play. Fantastic music on that as well. I mean, shooters have got to be one of the genres with the greatest music soundtracks, because you've got to have that thumping soundtrack to speed you along in the game, haven't you? And Silkworm and Gemini Wing, they're good games. They're not particularly the best games, but I just have fond memories of playing them because I've attached those nostalgic feelings to those games in particular in that time and those places. So that's why I like those ones. But there is another shooter, while we're on the subject of shooters, that will invoke a lot of feelings. And I mention this because it was a topic of a video recently on YouTube channel Rose Tinted Spectrum. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And he picked apart a wide range of opinions that surround this game. He used Twitter. He used Twitter polls to do what he called science. slightly inexact science, but it was more science than any of us have done on this game. To get comments, to get feelings about a game which scored 100% when it was reviewed in Amiga Computing magazine. So undeniably, it's the perfect game. Got 100%, and that game was Xenon 2. Now, Now, personally, I think somewhere in sort of the 70% kind of range is probably fair for this game. Dave's still shaking his head.
Higher.
You think higher?
Yeah.
In the context of its release, 1989, it was easy to be blown away by the cool bomb the bass music, the visuals, but plenty of better Amiga shooters would come along in the following years. I guess there just wasn't a huge amount of competition for it on our platform. Sorry, I say Dave, I've swept you up there and said as an Amiga owner.
It was on the ST.
The ST version of it is almost the same. The only real difference is that on the ST you get a chip tune instead of the mod tune, and on the ST the mod tune doesn't cut out when you shoot things. So it's, other than that, they're the very, very same.
Yeah, so on the Amiga, you lose channels from the music when you shoot because it has to make room for the sound effects. Yeah. It's odd. Yeah. So
it's not the only game to do that, but yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I see Xenon 2 as kind of the shadow of the beast of shooters at the time. It was great to put on display in a shop. It showed off the technical abilities of the Amiga very well. I didn't think it was a great game to play. Less so in the modern day. I made excuses for it back in the day and said, yeah, okay, this is an all right game. But when you go back and play it now and you compare it to the likes of R-Type, to Swiv, to Battle Squadron, to Gemini Wing, to name any other shooter, horizontal or vertical, Xenon 2 doesn't really keep up with it. Discuss. Any thoughts on Xenon 2? Because, Dave, you're shaking your head a lot, and I don't know if that's the hangover or if that's what I'm saying about Xenon 2.
No, but by the abuse you're heaping on Xenon 2, you've made me forget about the hangover. Xenon 2 got a bit of a pasting in that video. Rose Tinted Spectrum it's an excellent video. There's not one single thing he says that's wrong. Everything he says is correct. But I still think it's great. I think these days we tend to dismiss the hype and so on. In fact, Neil, you did it yourself there when you're talking about the music and so on. You shouldn't do that. We shouldn't strip all that away. You can't just start taking bits away and the context of the hype, the game, the adverts and the things and so on. Neil?
Well, I did say in the context of the day it was good. But,
well, I'm not specifically talking about you, but when people talk about, will you take away the music and so on, don't take away the music. Put the hype in there. Make it the whole bombastic Bitmap Brothers and in Casey's Psygnosis are a similar thing going on with their games. That all matters. It all adds to it. I think it's a great game subjectively, while objectively the gameplay isn't great. I think that the sum of it, I think it's objectively bad and subjectively good, or if you want to put it differently, it's far greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave.
But I get if someone was to look at it now, having not played it before, I don't really understand what they would get from it. But for me, because I had it on the ST back in the day, blew me away with what it did. I've never seen another ST game that did what Xenon 2 did. Yeah, I think it's great.
Chris, any thoughts on that?
I think it is. Well, I think we should change this title to this story as the title should be "Chris and Dave Agree on a Thing." Because I'm just nodding away to everything Dave just said there, even though I obviously played the better version on the Amiga. But the comparison
the better version is on the Atari STE. The STE version is the best version.
Oh, okay.
Continue.
Yep. Anyway, Chris and Dave almost agree on a thing. Anyway, moving on. So I think the comparison with Shadow of the Beast, even though they're completely different games, is spot on, because it is that. Shadow of the Beast gets a lot of flack and gets called a tech demo, and that just riles me right up, because that is actually what made it great. It showed off what the systems could do, and there was a playable game in there rather than just this passive rolling demo, which was what the demo scene do, instead of making games. So they're both great. The funny thing about Xenon 2 was if you played the free demo that you get on Amiga Format, for example, it was absolutely fantastic because they actually threw all the weapon upgrades at you in that first level that you got for free. And so actually it was a lot more fun to play the demo than it was to play the actual game, because the actual game is actually quite hard. And funnily enough, even though it's one of my favourite titles of all time, I haven't got very far in it at all. I've certainly gone a lot farther in things like Hybris, Swiv, and Battle Squadrons. I've played them to death. Xenon 2, you play it, you love it, you listen to the opening theme tune by Bomb the Bass, Mega Blast, and then you have a quick 10, 15 minutes of fun, and then you turn it off and play something that you can actually get through. So,
there we go. Well, we're drifting far away from R-Type now, but maybe we need another story just about, if anyone wants to submit some Xenon 2 stories to get us chatting about that, I'd love to go into it in more detail. Chris, you've got a CD32 recently, so what I would like you to do is get hold of the CDTV version, because you can run that on the CD32. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, and in the main menu, there is a special version of the game. And I don't know what's different about it. On the CDTV and on the Sharp X68000, you can play normal game or special mode. So
I'm actually writing this down
any difference,
because I will forget your name by the time we finish recording.
Yeah.
CDTV Xenon 2. I did not realise you could do that. And worst case, I could play it in emulation anyway. Fantastic.
And it plays the soundtrack.
Maybe that's the better version then. Maybe I'm wrong about the STE version being the best. Maybe the CDTV. I'd imagine they fixed the problem with the sound on it.
Well, that's what I'm hoping, Dave. I'm hoping what they've done is use the CD music side of it to play the theme so that you don't lose channels. That's what I'm hoping.
That's what it does. Yeah. That's what it does. So it's actually stressing the machine even less because it's not having to play the mod file. So there you go. Anyway, R-Type. We were talking about R-Type. Keep an eye out for R-Type on the Megadrive. It's a proper shooter on a system that really should have got a version back in the day. So now that injustice has been corrected, all the links are in the show notes, and we will be watching with interest.
So quite a while ago on This Week in Retro, we discussed at the time soon to be released Atari 50th Anniversary Collection that was being released on pretty much every system available. Did either of you pick it up, actually, before I go on?
No.
I didn't, but Alex down in the arcade will not shut up about this thing on his Switch. He is absolutely in love with the 50th anniversary release. Yeah.
Fair enough. I haven't picked it up either, but I've stuck it on my Christmas list, so we'll see what Father Christmas brings, and if he doesn't, I'll do what I always do and buy the things I wanted anyway myself. But one of the special things about the collection is the inclusion of Atari Jaguar games, which hadn't been done before in terms of official releases. And the reason is, apparently, is that the Jaguar is very hard to emulate. Some games really don't play ball. Well, the man behind the magic of making it work in this collection is a guy called Rich Whitehouse. And he is the brains behind the Jaguar emulation on the project, from my understanding. And with full permissions, he's actually been able to release a standalone Jaguar emulator for PC called Big P EMU. We'll put the link in the description to Rich's own video on the emulator where he gives a full tour. And I have to say, with emulators, you're usually looking at, very Windows look. If you're obviously using it in Windows, all the drop downs make you feel like you're in Windows because it's just another Windows program. Not a lot of thought goes into the interface when you're actually setting up the emulator. I'm thinking of things like WinUAE and that kind of thing. But not here. This is actually very, very polished, and it looks stunning. And it boasts 100% compatibility with the full Jaguar library, and it has a really slick. Yeah, it is very impressive, and it has this really slick graphical user interface that just looks like it's running on a console more than a PC in terms of presentation. Neil, have you seen this at all?
I've had a little skim through it since you shared the link with me and watched it. Couple of things jump out. Nothing major, but the one that jumps out for me is that the joypad, of course, on the Jag had a numpad on it, as well as the usual D-pad and buttons. So mapping of those looks interesting, to say the least, in the emulator. Yeah, so Chris is holding up there a joypad with an overlay for some game. What's the overlay you've got on there?
Where did you learn to fly?
Oh, okay.
Cybermorph.
So Chris has got the Cybermorph overlay over, I think it's 12 buttons, 3, 6, 9, 12 buttons.
It's 11, is it?
Go on, do the math, Chris.
No, it's not 11.
No, it's 12.
It's 12. He did the math. 12 buttons there. So how do you replicate that using a modern joypad? And well, if you look at the settings on this video, they're doing things like mapping the right shoulder button and the left trigger when pulled together. Well, that will get you number 9 on the joypad, on the numpad. So that's going to get messy pretty quickly. And so I think the first hurdle of Jag emulation is not the emulator itself; it's a suitable input device. I don't know if there is a USB adapter for a Jaguar joypad or not out there. Who knows? Or a replicated
Maybe you could ask
Jagpad.
people in the building to make one for you.
Maybe. I'll have a word. If you could just knock that up for us. The front end itself looks nice. Like you say, it's very much inspired by console dashboards, very easy to navigate. The list of games comes up with thumbnails for their covers, which is a pretty standard expectation these days. And I like that it's not trying to be too flashy and play preview videos or give you too much information. It's just a nice, easy thing to navigate. A huge number of options in those menus. So, I don't know if it would benefit from an advanced and a basic mode to hide some of those options, but they're all there. And the emulation itself, once you get into a game, I saw Alien vs. Predator running. It looks good. It runs as smoothly as a real Jag, if not better. It looks good. There was even options I saw to record and play back videos of yourself within the emulator playing. So it seems like it's a pretty mature and advanced emulator going on there. The only thing that you've got to do now is play the game of hunt the games that are actually good to play on the Jaguar, Chris.
Oh, that's actually a very fair point. Well, I think it's the best way to play Amiga 500 games, actually, because they're cartridge based.
There's a lot of ports.
There's so many ports. There's so many ports. But yeah, in terms of the interface and the options in this emulator, I mean, he really does go through in detail in the video. Don't expect just some emulated gameplay. It's full on about what you can actually do within the system and how he's presented it. So of course, as we're used to these days, you've got overclocking and underclocking options, but for all the chips individually that the Jaguar has, you've got options for PAL versus NTSC, and obviously making sure you're using the correct aspect ratio, 4:3, or I chop your fingers off. But yeah, in terms of the controller, you do raise a good point, Neil, because that was actually, and this was why I loved the Atari Jaguar controller when it first came out, was the SNES had 6 fire buttons and a D-pad, and then the Jaguar came out with heaps more buttons because of that numeric pad down the bottom, and everybody's looked at it like it's a bit of a stupid controller. But when you look at a modern controller like the PS4, you've only just got around the same number of buttons as the Jaguar controller had way back when.
True, but they're not laid out like your grandmother's telephone.
Yeah. So what this emulator does is you can configure. There's a pre-mapping, but you can reconfigure the mapping. And what it will then let you do is you can actually bring up a translucent overlay whilst playing a game, in case you need a bit of a reminder as to where you actually configured all those buttons. Keeping in mind, this is on a PC, so you could be using keyboard as well to play the games if you wanted to. And the other cool thing you can do, obviously we're used to thumbnails to choose your game, but what is also incorporated is the option to upload graphics for the Jaguar controller overlays. So if you're playing a certain game, when you do bring up that translucent memory, picture of the Jaguar controller, if you've loaded the image for it, it will actually have the correct gameplay overlay as well, which is a really nice touch.
So what we need now is a way to link an iPad up to it. So you can have your iPad on the desk, and that's your 12-button overlay, and then a normal joypad, and you can just reach up and jab the iPad. There's
perfect.
The solution.
That's perfect. That's the easiest way to play games in 2020, surely. Anyway, look, if only we had an Atari fanboy in the room who, we could see what he thought about the project, but we don't, so that's the end of the story. Okay, go on then, Dave. Go on, chime in.
My favourite Jag is my car.
Oh, here we go. I've got a Jag.
No, I won't, no. The Atari 50th thing left out the Atari ST completely, as far as I know, which is a weird thing to do. Maybe they felt that if they put the Atari ST in it, it would overshadow everything else and make everything else kind of pointless. Neil?
Well, I don't know what happened because obviously, and I'm not attacking it, obviously the Atari microcomputer division split away and became its thing. So maybe licensing is just a bit different for some of the things. And also lots of third parties were making games for the Jag. Whereas, go on.
Yeah, the Atari didn't make that many games for the Atari ST. In the early years of it, they ported some of their own arcade machines across, and they were great ports. But the rest of the Atari ST history wasn't really console type stuff. So perhaps that's why. But I am interested in the 50th thing. I will get it at some point. I feel like I want to hear the history of the rest of the Atari line that I don't know so much about. And the emulator, this emulator looks fantastic. But I couldn't see a physical PC release of the Atari 50th thing. It seemed to be like for the PlayStation and for the Xbox and for the Nintendo Switch. So I don't know if there is a PC one that I just have not seen. You know, you can get it in Steam, but
I would like to point out that given that we've covered Atari quite a few times over the years on This Week in Retro, this is another example of the kind of Atari story that we really like, because we had that whole period of Atari's opening a hotel, Atari and crypto. Atari and gambling, and all of this stuff, you know, casinos. We're starting to hear more stories like this. And another one that's come up recently is that Atari have resurrected this arcade game that they made back in the day that was never released because apparently it was too hard in play testing. It was called AKKA, AKKA space ARRH. AKKA. So they're going to re-release this, and they're redeveloping it now with Jeff Minter. So obviously it's going to be a super trippy game. And we're going to see that come back to life. That's another brilliant Atari story, and this just feels really nice that they're doing these kinds of things. So, you know, we've knocked Atari in the past, new Atari in the past, so well done them for doing what they're doing now. I want to see more of it.
Yeah, and I am relieved to be talking about Atari without having to feel embarrassed about it, because I think there was a period where, as you just said, the legacy of these wonderful, wonderful early consoles and arcade games, and then the Atari ST was ruined by money-grubbing hotels and crypto and gambling. So I'm glad that the 50th thing has been so well received. So I will look into it at some point. But as far as the Jaguar emulator is concerned, it's really impressive, and it looks great. It does all the games. That hopefully means that people make homebrew games for the Jaguar, there's more incentive for it to do it because there's a wider audience, and it's a powerful machine. You can make some wonderful homebrew on it. And as for the Jaguar, I've not played much with it because emulating is difficult, but there's Towers 2, Alien vs Predator, Tempest 2000, and I'm told that if I ever want a top tier console platformer, then Rayman is where to go for that on the Jag.
Iron Soldier as well is amazing. Sorry, just to chime in.
Yeah, and the actual look of the Jaguar itself, I've read some people saying the Jaguar looked terrible. They're wrong. The Jaguar looks great. It's fantastic. How could you not like that?
Well, yeah, it does have that kind of toilet seat aesthetic to it, doesn't it? But Dave, as an Amstrad fan, there's also the Jag homebrew library to dip into, and the Jaguar did get a homebrew release of Switchblade. So imagine that you could have Switchblade on both your Amstrad GX 4000, another fine-looking console, sat next to your Jag. You could play on both of those, your two top consoles.
The only two consoles that anyone would ever need.
I agree. Actually, the GX 4000 kind of they both look spaceshipy. That's nice. That's a nice pair there. Oddly, when I first heard about Jag games being included in the 50th anniversary collection, I was actually a bit miffed, as I'd literally just shelled out for my Jaguar, and they're not cheap now. But there's actually no logic to that. You know, I happily use Amiga emulation in many forms, and I still have and enjoy the original hardware, and it's not impacted the prices at all. In fact, I wonder, you know, in some ways, maybe it actually helps drive up the prices as more players come back to the fold. Plus, Jag games are really hard to get in your hands now, especially if you want box complete copies. So again, emulation and just being able to download a ROM or a legal backup is, you know, the easier way to get your hands on them. So even for me, you know, both the official 50th collection and this standalone emulator are welcome additions. Looking at Rich's channel, he's actually got quite a few cool projects under his belt. So we'll include some links in the show notes to the story about this project on Retro RGB, which is by Bob, and it was shared with us by Into the Vertical Blank. But we'll also include some
fantastic
links to
Atari podcast.
Oh, is it?
Into Vertical Blank, they're an Atari podcast. Absolutely fantastic. They're really into their Atari. Well worth a listen.
Okay, I'm going to have to get on board with that now. Okay.
Yeah.
But we'll also include some links to Rich's channel, his website, and his Patreon as well. All the best, Rich.
A brand new Amiga 2000. And I'm sorry if I bore you all with being such an Amiga fanboy. All I talk about is how much I love the Amiga. But this is a really worthwhile submission from Reese. Now, Control-Alt-Reese, as everyone knows, is also an Amiga fanboy. Now, it's of someone I know called Glenn, who runs a channel, Casual Retro Gamer, CRG, and he's from Neil's neck of the wood in Northern Ireland. And what he's done is taken a now, don't laugh. Neil's dad is from Northern Ireland. So he has a link to Northern Ireland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You don't tell from his accent. Now, what he's done is taken a project by Jason Neus, which is to reconstruct an Amiga 2000 mainboard, but in an EATX form factor. So the original Amiga 2000 motherboard is not a million miles away from the basic shape of the EATX, but this is proper EATX in as far as EATX. How many times am I going to say EATX? EATX can never be proper because I don't think it was officially. I think there's something unofficial about it.
Just go with EATX. EATX. Now I'm hungry.
It's in that proper form factor with holes in the PCB for the right places to mount it. So that means you can put it inside a normal PC case, which is a bit like the BBC Micro story from last week. So what Glenn has done is get a hold of this project, and with a combination of custom chips harvested from an Amiga 5000. Amiga 5000? No, he hasn't.
500.
Amiga 10 million. Amiga 500 plus with a damaged board and new components that are still available and modern recreations of unavailable components. I think it's a what's the Buster called? What's the recreation of the Buster called?
Bluster?
Bluster, yeah.
Bluster, that's the one. That's the one, a Bluster. He's built himself a brand new A2000. Now, Neil, you've done a similar project, haven't you?
Yeah, that was the Amiga 500 Plus, the beautiful purple board by Rob or Peepo UK. And that was a replica of an A500 Plus, but a like-for-like replica of the motherboard. So it was designed to go back in the original case, or a case that could accommodate that. For example, the Checkmate, or not the Checkmate Mini, just the full-size Checkmate case that came out. So that's what that was. And these projects are great. They're really useful for people who want to enjoy an authentic but reliable experience with old hardware. Yes, they depend on transplanting original custom chips over. So, those are old chips. They could fail. But you've eliminated a lot of old silicon just by replacing the main board. And you've also given yourself a form factor that can go in a new case with a modern power supply with, all your cooling fans in there. Not that an Amiga needs a lot of cooling, but, it's always nice to keep things cool, keep a bit of airflow, and that helps with the longevity of these chips as well. So I'm all for it, so long as you're not ripping apart perfectly good Amigas to make these things. There are plenty of A500 Pluses that have spewed their guts up to work on with these things. Another one I like is called the AMI ITX. That is a mini ITX form factor Amiga. So ideal if you want a super, super compact Amiga. When you look at this board, the chips are really close together on this thing. They're all crammed in there, all the original custom chips. So that's another option if you want super small. And I noticed on last week's YouTube video, Tim D left a comment and he said, I'm sure you already know, but the A3000 Plus, so this was a system we were talking about in relation to Dave Haney's story last week. He said the A3000 Plus became a reality only recently in the form of the AA3000 Plus, an A3000 mainboard featuring AGA and the DSP. They even got the DSP working. So thank you, Tim, for making us aware of that. And I did a little search, and you can find on Amibay, I think it is, on the forums there. There was a user who first posted about this, his project. I think his username is Heese or Heese, Hese. He's based in Finland, and he posted in 2019, here's my project that I'm working on, and explained it all. So going back a few years, that became a reality as well. Of course, there's no software to run on it to take advantage of it, but that's not the point. Somebody wanted to make that a reality, and they did. So there are so many options to try these things out in different form factors, or even systems that never came out in the first place in the case of the A3000 Plus.
Now, Glenn's video was in two parts, and it totals an hour and a half. and you might assume that it's not heavily edited. It's just lots of just watching him do stuff, but it actually is heavily edited. I've sat happily through each part of it without wanting to stop. Glenn's put enormous effort into talking about why he's doing it, how he's doing it, what his plans are, what the benefits are of this. And he's edited it really well, so it's a thoroughly good watch. I've been watching his channel for a while now, but I like how he does things, and I like his general manner. But I think these videos are a level above anything he's done before. He's obviously decided to do this. Other people have done the project. I know that my friend Pillock has done it, for example. But to do the project and to film it all and then to heavily edit it, it's incredible. So I would suggest you give it a watch. But it's not the only project that has a new board. There's loads of them. And the ones I'm familiar with are Rob Taylor's, the one that Neil mentioned already. And that's the one Neil did. And I've got 3 to do, and I hope to get around to them soon. Once I've got the place tidied up, I think I'll do them. I'm not going to start until the place is tidy, because you need lots of space for it and lots of time, and I don't want to have to pack it away. So the first one I'm going to do is the 60 clone, which I've got here. I'm holding up the camera. It's a lovely red board with it looks like gold, the copper on it.
Nice.
It's a Commodore 64, and it's going to go in my bread bin. But the other one I've got here, apart from the 500 plus, is the Amstrad CPC 464, and it's a lovely blue one. And this one is
lovely.
This one is particularly special because if you look at the silk screening, which I'm holding up the camera, and it probably won't focus, so I asked Duncan to put a picture on it. It's got my name on it.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
I've got a credit on it. Special thanks to the Brew, Velociraptor Dave, and Noel Lopez, because cool. I desoldered the board and sent the chips and so on into to Rob to do it. He did all the work. What he does is, I think he sands it down and finds where all the traces are, and then reconstructs it and tests it. Incredible process. Chris, what do you think?
I think it's fantastic, and especially CRG's video. I'm actually, in all honesty, I'm part way through part 2, because I'm happy to take it in chunks. Just got so much on at the moment, but it's just stunning work, and I just wish I had this level of skill. When I first got into this, my plan was to rebuild an A1200, but I'm not going to touch it. Maybe in a couple of years when I've got my skills up, but not right now. But I totally agree with what you say there, Dave, in terms of it's not just the making of the A2000 itself. That's an effort right there, but he's just gone that extra mile. And this is another level above his normal videos in terms of the production quality and the detail that he's gone to in this video. And it's just absolutely awesome to see. Yeah, loving it.
The thing that's most rewarding about all these things is the build process. As Dave said, you've got to make the space for it. You've got to make the time for it. You've got to check your solder Fumix director is working efficiently, because you're going to be desoldering and soldering a lot. But if you can set something like this up on your workbench over days or even weeks and just methodically come back to it, add some more components here, build it up slowly until the moment of truth, that first power on test. When it works, it's a superb feeling. It really is great.
Now, this all taps into something that I don't think we think much about now. And I think it's partly because when we got into micros, it kind of faded away. And that's back at the start of home micros. It was typical to build your own micro. You didn't usually just buy one off the shelf in the late 70s. So the Apples and the various different machines that we don't talk much about now, they were often built from a kit. And in fact, if you go to a really special one in UK history, that's the Sinclair ZX range. The ZX80 came in kit form, although you could pay extra to have it pre-assembled. So people would buy it in kit form and assemble it. I know, Neil, you've got one that was never assembled, which is quite uncommon in the cave. And I think the consensus was you to buy a modern kit and build one of those for a video eventually. And for a while, that didn't continue. I mean, the Spectrum range started, they were all pre-assembled in Dundee, I think, or most of them in the Timex factory there. The Spectrum, though, is a really nice and simple machine. And these days you can, if you want to, build a Spectrum, which I think kind of nicely takes it back to the start of the Sinclair ZX stuff. And the way in is something called a Harlequin, which someone has worked out how the ULA, the ULA is the custom chip in the Spectrum, worked out how it works, so you can do it now without a ULA. So that's a way to do it. Now, I've not got around to doing the 3 things I've got to do, but I have built smaller things, smaller projects. I've fixed things. It's really, really rewarding. If you're going to have a machine for the rest of your life and you think you can do something yourself, you can build it yourself, or even build some of the peripherals you use yourself, solder them up, it's super rewarding to be using something like that you've done. So give it a shot, or maybe think about it. But in the meantime, you can watch Glenn's project and you can get a bit of enjoyment and fun from what he's done vicariously.
Time now for our community question of the week, and it's all about arcades. So the question last week was, let's talk arcades. Quite simply, what is the first arcade machine you think of when you think of an arcade? The arcade venue is what we're talking about. So you walk in, and what's the first one that you made a beeline for to play on? Maybe it was the one with the loudest attract sound, maybe Robocop shouting in the background, or the crashing noise of the outrun car flipping over. You think of an arcade, you think of a game. What is it and why? So let's open up our Reddit and we'll see what the answers are here. Hopefully we've all got them ordered in the same way, because that sometimes catches us out.
Loads of answers this week. Loads.
Okay, so the one at the top for me is from Richard Shears. Is that the same for you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Richard says, it was the largest machine in the room, but this was for very good reason. I would go at school lunch breaks along with 3 good friends. Therefore, with limited time, we would want to play a game we could all enjoy together. Oh, I think I know what this is going to be.
Yes.
He says, to give a hint as to this larger than normal arcade machine, because I'm not an assertive person, I would play as Valkyrie. The only real issue this would cause was back when kids were cruel and gender identity was something that would be ridiculed. Oh, poor Richard. But anyway, I digress. Yes, the game of choice was indeed Gauntlet. I can still hear the cries of anguish from Andy as the machine played Elf Needs Food Badly, just as Dan playing Thor would shoot the food. As a side note, however, I fear the most money that passed through my hands into the arcade was caused by the sit-down version of Afterburner. That adrenaline rush as you performed the role and the hydraulics attempted to reproduce the movement had me hooked at £1 a shot.
Wow.
It was an expensive hit.
Wow.
Was that the R360 one then? I think that was where it span you around. I don't think I ever saw an R360. Even at the Trocadero, I saw it on the telly, but I don't think I ever saw one in person.
I thought I did. Didn't G-Lock have a 360-degree rotating one? That's what I'm thinking of when I'm.
That's the same thing, wasn't it? Called G-Lock R360.
Well, G-Lock was the follow-up to Afterburner, wasn't it? Essentially Afterburner 2, because it had cockpit view.
So you had G-Lock Air Battle in 1990.
Yeah.
And then R360. Yeah, G-Lock R360.
Okay, so that came after Afterburner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played that at Lakeside, the shopping centre there. They had an arcade there. It's the one time I played that.
Dave's bouncing. What do you have to say to us, Dave?
Richard's answer was about Gauntlet. I think you're going off on a distraction there.
No, he's mentioned Afterburner as well.
He did mention Afterburner.
So we proceeded to talk about G-Lock instead.
Okay, go on. My memory of
is my favourite arcade machine is Gauntlet. That tune you get for Gauntlet 2 is magnificent.
Well, that's Gauntlet 2, Dave. We're not talking about Gauntlet 2.
I've done myself, haven't I?
Have you played the remake on the PS4? It's actually very good. Anyway.
No, hang on Gauntlet. My memories of Gauntlet are Butlin's Minehead. It was in the middle of a room which also had Skate or Die, Outrun, and one other. I can't remember what the other was, but Indiana Jones was there in the Temple of Doom. So these were like top tier golden age arcades, and I just have great memories of them. Interestingly, though, when we had the launch of the arcade, we have Gauntlet in the arcade, the big Gauntlet machine, but all those hardcore Gauntlet 2. Shall I just stop the story there? We have Gauntlet 2 in the arcade, and all of those hardcore game players that came down from the UK VAC Arcade Collectors Club, they didn't really touch it. They were all going for the high scores on the other machines. And I can only assume that's because Gauntlet was designed as a coin muncher and not a high score challenge game.
You just put a coin in whenever you need to, and you have to do that to keep playing. So
I love it.
I wondered.
Interested.
I've always wondered, and that answers a question I've had for a long time. I've always wondered about Gauntlet and Gauntlet 2, whether a really skilled player could go for a long time on it. And from what you're saying there, doesn't sound like it.
We'll have to look into that. I wouldn't like to say definitively, but yeah.
Yeah, I would like to know. I would like to know a proper answer to that. Maybe Alex can tell us. But if you go up to Gauntlet and you put 20 pence in, can you go for a long length of time, or do you just have to keep paying? Is it like a timer thing? You have to keep putting money in. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, who wants to take the second answer?
Chris.
So the next one is by MRE in JP. Early 80s, I was a youngling living off a base in Germany. My parents felt a children's bowling league would be a good way to stay connected back then. The bowling alley was the center of entertainment on military bases. There were many arcades I love, and perhaps Gallagher is my number one. But my first arcade memories that stuck with me, dropping a quarter after quarter into Ghosts and Goblins, trying to get past the first or second levels. It was exceptionally hard for a young player like myself. What makes these memories permanent is that the game was accompanied by some MTV video, tape on repeat, in particular Genesis Land of Confusion. Imagine that in the background while you're playing that, which bordered on the terrifying. Something about those puppets creeped me out way more than the monsters I was trying to defeat in the game. Ghosts and Goblins and Land of Confusion are forever permanently linked. They are one in my mind. That opens up an interesting future topic, I think, where sometimes you listened to certain music while playing a certain game. That's all I'll say on that. That is actually a fascinating topic. Yeah.
That would be a good question, maybe. Yeah. But I'm gonna have to correct MRE and JP. It would have been Deutschmark after Deutschmark, not quarter after quarter going into those machines on a German airbase, unless it was an American airbase and everything was in American.
Yeah, it might have been.
It would be one of the British or American air bases there, and I'm pretty sure they might be using quarters.
They might have been.
Yeah, you think they would have just kept...
Maybe wind your neck in a bit.
Okay.
How's your hangover going? Dave?
I'm crabbing now.
Well, I think Dave is probably right, but if anyone was on an airbase in Germany in the 80s, let us know. Did you use the local currency or your freedom dollars to play
That's
your arcade
interesting,
games? I guess everything would have been flown over, so they would have just taken the arcade games over with them, so they would have been US ones. Maybe.
Don't know. Maybe.
Okay.
Next is
Chris.
Tech Made Easy.
Sorry, Dave.
Chris is not getting two.
Yeah.
We used to have a third host. What was his name?
Chris. He was Australian. Once we found out he was lying about being Australian, we booted him out. The Simpsons. Tech Made Easy UK says the Simpsons arcade cabinet, he says, with up to 4 players. One of my earliest memories, yes, I'm quite young for retro, was playing this with my sister at a Butlins Holiday Park when I was about 8 or 9. My first real experience of any form of arcade machine. I grew up in a small market town which simply didn't have an arcade, so it's an experience I never had. A while later, I remember spending way more than was acceptable in a Virtua Fighter arcade machine randomly placed in a Spanish airport somewhere. I think airport arcade machines were greedier than normal arcade machines. I'm sure they did everything they could to get more money.
Everything's greedier at an airport, isn't it?
Oh, aye.
It's awful.
I think my parents just wanted half an hour's peace and gave me all their leftover change.
There you go. And Frosty Cheesecake replied to that saying, I also grew up in a small town, but that Simpsons machine seemed ubiquitous in the 90s regardless. It was everywhere. It was in my local arcade. I remember when it appeared, I used to like watching the recreation of the TV show's intro with the Simpsons title appearing and the digitized version of the soundtrack where it goes, The Simpsons, and appears through the clouds. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. It's like, wow, this is like watching the cartoon at the time. But I never really played the game. I wasn't really interested in the game itself.
Is it the same hardware as Turtles?
Probably. I want to say yes. Similar looking cabinet. Maybe there was a conversion kit for it. Similar sized sprites and everything. It feels like it should be if it isn't. Something to look into. Yeah. The other big 4-player one that you would have had in that row would have been NBA Jam, which is different hardware again.
Yeah.
Can't think of any other big 4-player ones that are out
There's
there.
a lot of 3 players. The
Gauntlet.
Capcom ones, particularly the ones that I like with 3 players.
Mm-hmm. And then you had things like you had the racing games like Super Sprint or Championship Sprint, which were 3-player, but you also had Hot Rod, which was a sit-down 4-player cocktail with a steering wheel on each corner. That was great fun. I didn't see that often, but we were lucky enough to have one of those. Yeah, there you go. There's another topic for discussion, Chris. 4-player arcade games.
Nice. Yeah.
Shall we read out the names of the arcade games that other people have submitted for the ones we're not going to read out?
Time Crisis.
We've got Time Crisis, Ghosts and Goblins. We have Pinball. We have racing cabinet games. We have Choplifter, Sega Rally, R-Type, Galaga, Championship
Stun Runner
Sprint.
gets a mention. Did you ever have a Stun Runner at your arcade? That was an impressive cabinet.
I remember seeing it.
No, that was an Atari cabinet. I think it was based on the hard driving hardware, 3D tunnel running.
Yeah.
That was quite good fun. What else have we got there? You've mentioned Sega Rally.
Bubble Bobble.
Sinister. There's a lot of answers
Star
on this
Wars
week's
sit-down
one.
cabinet. Did the Star Wars sit-down cabinet have attract sounds? I can't remember.
I think they all
I'm
did.
sure it did. Most of them did. Final Fight is
the movie
mentioned.
samples.
Cruising USA.
Oh, Battle
There are
Zone.
so many. I think this might be our most answered question of the week ever.
Battle Zone, Outrun, Hang On,
Arkanoid.
Galaga.
Yeah, loads.
Nice.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone
Thank
for
you, people.
participating.
Thank
So it's time for this week's question of the week. And if you'd like to take part, head over to reddit.com/r/this week in retro, where you will see the latest show and the question of the week pinned so you can participate. You can also submit your news stories for us to consider talking about in future shows. So it's time for this week's question of the week, and it's a special one because it involves props from at least 2/3 of the crew. Chris, what's the question?
Yeah, this may have accidentally been my brainchild, actually. We'll see if it works. But basically, we've each got something from our collections wrapped up for Christmas, okay? So the question of the week is to simply guess what each of us has wrapped up. And so we'll describe them each in turn. And, for anybody watching on YouTube, we'll show the package. Well, at least me and Dave will, because Neil didn't do his homework.
Okay, this is not video specific. We've got to give as many clues as possible.
Exactly. So we'll describe what the package looks like, but we'll also give a clue, and you have to try and guess what each of our packages is. And we don't even know ourselves. Well, obviously, I know what I've wrapped up. Dave knows what he's wrapped up, but we don't know each other's. Neil?
Okay, so first of all, we're going to go for Dave for this new game on the show, which we call Describe Your Package.
Yeah, so mine is small and thin. And if you shake it, you can hear a bit of a rattle. It's wrapped. I've wrapped it in brown paper, which reminds me to ask, did you hear what happened to the brown paper cowboy?
No.
Go on.
He was arrested for rustling.
Yeah.
My package is about the size of a double cassette box, which might be a clue there. Now, here's the clue. My present to myself is the second part of something that I had as a kid. I had the first part, but not the second part, and I would have loved it if I had it. Everyone will have heard about this famous franchise. Outside of gaming, it's a famous franchise, and I've talked about the past about playing part 1. So what would I have given myself part 2 of in this brown paper wrapped package the size of a double cassette box?
Are these staying wrapped up until the next recording so we can unwrap them?
Yes, we've got a guest on next week, and the guest next week will take a guess and we will unwrap and see if anyone got it right from the submitted answers.
Okay, so that's Dave.
Neil.
Chris. No, let's go to Chris. Chris,
We'll go to me.
describe. Hang on, I've got to lead you in, Chris. I've got to lead you in.
Oh.
You've got to keep the tension and the excitement.
Let's do it.
Chris, describe your package.
Right. So my package is about the size of a hand, I guess. Yep. My package is tapered, and it's about 2 inches deep at the thickest part. It would usually have a long bit. But that's
so childish.
What are you doing, Chris?
it would usually have a long bit, but that's tucked away and caged up inside the package. That's how I wrapped it up.
Chris, it's not getting better.
And my extra clue, okay, I'm going to actually quote Total Recall. My clue is, baby, You make me wish I had 3 hands. Neil.
Wow. Yes, Chris.
Your package?
What are you doing?
Tell us about your package.
So, Duncan, if you're watching on video, Duncan is going to have to edit in a picture of my package because I couldn't fit it onto the web camera here, recording here. So, mine is about mine is about the size of a video game box. It smells like a video game box. It tastes like a video game box. But when I shake it, it makes a sound like this. Let me just give you the sound of my package one more time. That'll be easy for some, impossible for others. That's my package. So thank you everyone for playing. What did we call this? My Christmas package. and we look forward to revealing our packages in next week's show. As always,
Final show of the year.
Oh, the final show of the year. What's the plan, Dave, for the rest of the year?
So we have one more show, and then we will have a couple of episodes where we've got our outtakes compiled. Thank you, Duncan. So you'll get outtakes for the 2 weeks that we're not here, so that at least you've got something to giggle at on a Saturday morning.
Excellent. So we've got another. Does that mean that our next episode comes out on Christmas Day?
Our next episode comes out on the 24th, Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve. Lovely. Excellent. So we'll have to make sure it's super
Perfect timing for
Christmassy.
the Christmas episode.
Great.
Yeah.
As always, thank you to everyone for listening. We'll see you over on the subreddit or in the comments, and we look forward to next week's show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave, Chris from 005 AGIMA, and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.